Hello again, Exorcist fans. I just wanted to try to re-record my video that I did on Chapter 5 through My Most Grievous Fault of the Exorcist TV series. I got flagged by from the last video, actually the last two videos I did, one on Chapter 5 and one on Chapter 6. They said I had image violations, use of their material. So it wasn't a copyright strike. It was just that they were saying I was using their copyrighted material inappropriately. Well, you never know how you're going to satisfy the imperial tyrants at Fox or at YouTube. So I'm trying to re-record my stuff for you again so that I can make it as interesting as possible for you to look at my video here. So hopefully I can be as insightful this time as I was the last time, because I don't remember every point I made. But let's get on with it. Let's see what happens. So I was talking about in Chapter 5 of The Exorcist, Through My Most Grievous Fault, which aired about 2 weeks ago now. One of the first things that came about in that episode was the fact that the demon, Casey's demon, actually lured her father to sit by her side so she could tell him, "Daddy, I have a secret, want to hear it." And for those of you, oh, by the way, I should have said this before. There will be spoilers in this review, and so if you haven't seen the episode for whatever reasons, you don't want to be spoiled, please go ahead and come back at a later time after you have. So anyway, Daddy, I have a secret, want to hear it. Okay, so this is the demon's attempt to lure Henry to Casey's side, where she then ropes him over the neck with a chain, by the neck with a chain, and she starts whispering in this demonic language in his ear, and this is where the black tongue comes out of her mouth and all that other kind of stuff. And then we see in the next scene after that, Henry is of course now wondering what the heck is going on with Angela. He, at this point, I am assuming, knows what Angela's real name is, and we get hints that he does know that in later scenes where he actually tells her about her need to speak the truth. So that lays the groundwork for something that's going on here that I want to talk about a little bit later, which I actually have talked about in subsequent videos, which I think are in fact still up on YouTube, thanks to you people at Fox, hopefully not taking those down too. Anyway, so, or asking me to take them down rather. Anyway, so, one of the things I did want to get to, though, is very intriguing, a scene of exorcism combat between the demon inside Casey, Father Marcus, and Father Tomas, because that's where I really started to talk about some of the things that intrigued me about this episode beyond just a simple review, some insights that I got. So let's get to those things and see if we can get back to where we were before. So in this scene, Father Marcus and Father Tomas are confronting Casey's demon, and they are trying their best and their brave hearts to try to get this demon to relent in some capacity, to give some ground in some way, so that they can make some progress in terms of getting this wicked creature out of Casey. However, one of the things that interested me about this was one of the things that the demon said to them in the course of this battle. Let's take a listen to that.
Son of this child of God, I command you.
Suffer the little children, priest. She's a piglet to slaughter.
She's a child of God.
She is a bastard spirit of a jealous despot. Your God is filth. Kneel before me. I am havoc. I am despair.
You are nothing but a lost angry soul throwing a temper tantrum. You let this young woman go!
Okay, so what interested me about that scene was the fact that the demon calls Casey the bastard spirit of a jealous despot. God is filth, right? So what is this suggesting to me, and why do I point it out? Well, what it's suggesting to me is that, number one, and then you see Father Marcus's response, which we'll also get into as well. But number one, according to things that I have read in demonic lore, demonology, right, and the things I've read about exorcism, and I admit I'm no expert on this by any chance, stretch of the imagination. I'm just telling you things I've gotten some insights from, read before. In demonic lore, fallen angels are jealous of human beings. They are jealous of God's affection for human beings, and they are jealous of the fact that God has made these beings that he loves so much. That, in fact, demons regard as inferior to them. Okay? In most of the literature that I've read about this, demons consider themselves to be closer to God's nature, God's power, God's authority, God's true level of being, even though obviously they know they're not all powerful or all knowing, other things of that nature, right? But they regard themselves to be closer to God's true nature and level of being than humans are or ever could be, at least according to that understanding. So the question becomes, why is God so attached to these what might be considered inferior beings? And for those demons who rebelled against God's authority, according to the literature, right, according to biblical teaching, Christian theology, other things of this nature, Lucifer and his host, angelic host, who he used to rebel against God's power, God's authority, God's transcendent order, all of that. Why is God so obsessed is probably not the right word, but why is God so in love with these lowly little insignificant creatures who they're not even immortal? So in this scene, you see the demon actually making statements to this idea. Bastard spirit of a jealous despot, right? This inferior little creature that I'm occupying, there's no reason for God to love this thing more than it loves me. And I'm getting that impression as I look at this scene. And then you see Father Marcus rebuke the spirit by telling it, you are a lost, angry soul throwing a temper tantrum. This seems to really verify that whole idea that the spirit is somehow doing this because it's trying to rebel against God's order, and is certainly against these little favorite itty-bitty creatures called human beings that God loves so much. Why don't you love me as much as you love them? You're willing to forgive them, but you won't forgive me. Doesn't make any sense, does it? But it makes perfect sense if you think about it that way. And I think we see this if we look at another scene in this in the story in this particular episode that we're going to get to in a moment that actually kind of suggests the same thing to me. But I want to get your thoughts on it. Tell me what you think about that idea.
Where are you fighting? You know what it is? There's paradise within your reach. Never be able to touch it. Imagine never sleeping together. You feeling the sun on your face.
Please. What do you want from me?
Quit pretending. You know perfectly well what you must do. Bring her to me!
Okay, so I wanted to include that scene because it seems to kind of re-verify or reiterate what I'm talking about, and that is this whole notion. Do you know what it's like to have paradise within your reach but never be able to touch it? Here again, it looks to me as if the demon is in fact saying, I am part of a greater reality, greater, more wonderful than you can ever realize, you little bitty, lowly little stinking human, and yet here I am, banished from what is nearest and dearest to me, the communion that I long for the most, that is to be in my Father's presence, and yet I can't get back to that reality. I'm stuck here with you peon little pieces of crap human beings in this level of existence. I can't get back to where I really most want to be, in the place I want to be, the place I'm most fulfilled. You see, and I think that this kind of jealousy and wrath and anger here is what motivates this demon in part to be what it is what it is doing. Okay, and that is of course torturing human beings, and in this case now it's torturing Casey, and I think this is the same demon who at one time was in fact torturing her mother. something that we get to in dealing with in other places. But again, is this another sign of the kind of demonic jealousy here? This being longing to get back to its place in the celestial order of things, and yet realizing that it cannot because it has been banished, and because there is no way back for it. At least perhaps it believes that at this point. Another, a question for us all to ponder. Of course, the other side of this revelation is that it says, you know very well what you must do, bring her to me. And as I reiterated in the other video that you've probably seen by now, we know who her, quote unquote, her, that is, she is. And that, of course, is the mom, Angela. Now, there's a very specific reason why the demon is saying, bring her to me. And of course, the revelation of that is brought forth at the conclusion of this episode. But we know now, for those of you who have seen that, why that is the case. It is the case because Angela Rance, lo and behold, happens to be Regan McNeil, the originally possessed child from the original 1973 Exorcist movie. That is an excellent and brilliant tie-in my opinion, to this entire show, as I reiterated in part 3 of this video. And so I think that bringing that out in this episode shows why the demon is so obsessed now with this family, and in particular why it has used, however it has gotten back into this family's life, why it has used the doorway, the foothold that was provided to it by Casey to come back into this family's life. Now it has Casey. It wants the mother again because it was originally inside her at a long time ago when she was a girl, and it was pushed out, right? It was forced out. Now it's found a way back, and it wants to exploit that way back to get whatever it wants out of this family. A brilliant tie-in, in my opinion. Now, I originally included this scene in my first attempt at this video because when I first watched this particular scene, I thought Tomas was such a weakling, such a weak nut for falling for this very low-level trick by the demon. I mean, this is so obvious, it's ridiculous. We as the audience cannot, most of us probably would not sympathize with Tomas for falling for this trick. You see him knowing that this is, first of all, this is not Jessica. He knows that this is the demon. He knows, he even prays for forgiveness. He knows he's being put under some kind of a trick or spell, if you will, but yet he continues to go forward and fall for it. And the question I asked when I originally watched this scene was, why? Why, Tomas, are you such an idiot? Why didn't you turn around and run out of the room? Why didn't you call for Father Marcus, who would be far better at resisting this temptation than you would, and who could shield you from it very easily and could teach you how to deal with it? Why didn't you do any of those things? But then again, I thought to myself, you know what? This is a very human error, and it's also a teaching moment for Tomas, because now he's getting to understand what it really means to be an exorcist, confronting the power of a being that is well above his level of understanding, confronting the authority of this creature who has a tremendous access to knowledge and a plane of existence, a plane of power that he has no understanding of whatsoever. And it's really a teaching moment to understand just how vulnerable a human being can be. So even though I looked at Tomas at this particular instance when I first watched the episode and thought what a little weak nut he was, I was able to forgive him and go on and say, you know what, okay, just about any of us could probably fall for this if we had no knowledge or no experience of this. So I still count Tomas as a good man, even though he had to be rescued from this by Father Marcus. But there was a consequence, of course, because he had to be rescued from this problem this temptation by Father Marcus. We also recognize that there's still this tremendous weakness, this very big gaping weakness in Tomas's life, where Marcus told him, if you intend to do this with me, if you intend to become an exorcist, to confront the power of these beings so far above you and their understanding, their knowledge, their power, you must let go of all complicating issues in your life. And what does Tomas do? He does not take heed of the instruction that Marcus gives him. That is, of course, his love and his attachment to Jessica, which has caused this issue in the first place. So what does he do? As we see, he walks dejected in the rain to Jessica's house, where he proceeds from there to have an adulterous affair with her in some way to make himself feel better for the failure that he has undertaken, or should I say that he has succumbed to. But still, I still count Tomas as a good guy. He has a learning curve to undergo here, but it's going to take some time. So we don't count Tomas out yet, even though he has subjected himself to this problem, and even though he has succumbed to it. He's still a good guy who deserves a second chance, and we'll see if he gets that second chance after all.